What happens when a royal interview, meant to inspire, spirals into a televised powder keg? When the camera lights come on and the smiles fade, what's left? This wasn't supposed to be that kind of show. But then again, Prince Harry wasn't just any guest. The audience inside the Kelly Clarkson Show was buzzing. Kelly had teased a very special guest all week, and when Prince Harry stepped on stage, charming, slightly unshaven, and impeccably poised, the crowd erupted. Kelly greeted him with her trademark warmth. Ladies and gentlemen, we're joined today by someone who's redefining legacy, stepping out from royal shadows, and building something truly meaningful. Prince Harry, welcome. Thanks, Kelly. It's good to be here, Harry said with an easy smile. The opening minutes were smooth. Harry spoke of his foundation's work with veterans. He shared stories about trauma, resilience, and his belief that healing was possible for anyone, with the right support. Kelly nodded along, genuinely engaged, asking all the right questions. Everything was going according to script. But scripts don't survive pressure. 10 minutes in, Kelly glanced at her next card and smiled gently. Harry, if it's okay, I'd love to ask you something a little more personal. His shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. Kelly continued, You've spoken so openly about your journey, stepping away from the royal family, starting fresh in America, building a new kind of life. I think a lot of people watching relate to that, to reinvention. I just wonder, how do you balance it all? Public pressure, family expectations, and still try to keep your identity intact? It was a fair question, softball even, but it hit like a brick. Harry paused, the smile drained. The charm turned to calculation. Kelly, he began slowly, I thought we were here to talk about veterans, about mental health, not family gossip. Kelly didn't flinch. Absolutely. That's exactly what we're here for. But your story inspires people, not just because of your work, but because of your honesty. He looked away, jaw set. I've been honest, he said after a moment, painfully honest. And every time I am, it becomes fodder for tabloids, YouTubers, and breakfast shows looking for clickbait. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Kelly leaned in slightly, her tone steady. I understand that truly, but here, we don't do clickbait. We do connection. That's why your voice matters. Harry's eyes flickered back to her. You think this is connection? Kelly hesitated, but only for a second. I think this is your moment to reclaim the narrative. Boom! There it was, the spark. Harry gave a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. You know, it's funny. I thought I left the UK to get away from this. Now Kelly's face shifted, ever so subtly, a controlled breath, a sharpened focus. This is America, Harry. And here we listen before we judge. The studio crowd murmured, supportively. And that's when Meghan's name didn't even need to be spoken. Her absence, her shadow, her controversies, they hung invisibly in the air. The public hadn't forgotten, and neither had Harry. He folded his hands. Then let's talk about people who actually need help. Veterans suffering in silence. Not about my family. Kelly held his gaze. We will, but I believe who you are informs what you fight for. People need to know that you're not just a symbol. They need to know the man. And right there in that moment, Harry cracked. Not with anger, but weariness. He shook his head slightly, smiled bitterly. You want to know the man? He's tired of being polite, of being misrepresented, of being asked to bleed just enough for the ratings. A silence dropped like a curtain. Even the camera crew hesitated to move. Kelly adjusted in her chair, the edge of steel in her voice now evident. Then let's make this clear. This isn't about ratings. This is about reaching people. If you can't do that, maybe you're not the one who should be here. Harry leaned forward, voice low. Careful, Kelly. She leaned right back at you, Your Highness. The studio, moments ago warm and lively, had turned ice cold. And this was only the beginning. The air was thick, like everyone had forgotten how to breathe. Kelly's eyes never left Harry. Her voice was calm, her body still, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. This wasn't just a celebrity interview anymore. This was a live standoff, and neither side was backing down. Harry crossed one leg over the other, posture casual, but the tension in his jaw gave him away. I came here to talk about substance, he said, voice clipped. Not to be psychoanalyzed under stage lights. Kelly tilted her head. No one's psychoanalyzing you. I asked a human question. You're allowed to answer it or not, but don't mistake sincerity for interrogation. The audience murmured, this time not in Harry's favor. He noticed. I see what's happening, Harry said, glancing around. This isn't about understanding. It's about painting a narrative, one where I'm defensive, overreacting, maybe even unstable. Right? Kelly's brows drew together slightly. No, Harry, it's about giving our audience the whole picture. You've spent years in the public eye asking to be seen as a real person. I'm giving you that space. His voice rose a notch. By bringing up the things I've asked repeatedly not to focus on. You didn't ask me not to, Kelly replied firmly. Your team approved these questions. That landed like a punch. Harry leaned back, blinking. Kelly didn't gloat. She didn't need to. I'm not here to trap you, she continued. I'm here because millions of people look to you as an example of change. But they also see contradiction. You left the institution, but the spotlight never left you. They want to know why. And that's when it happened. Harry's frustration began to boil. Maybe because no one lets me go. Maybe because every time I try to talk about real causes, I'm dragged back into the circus. Maybe I'm tired of being a headline instead of a human being. Kelly blinked, taking the blow with grace. Then be human here, she said gently. Tell us what's important, but don't attack me for asking what everyone is thinking. I'm not the enemy here. Another murmur from the crowd, this time applause. It was subtle, but real. Harry noticed that too. He looked out at the studio audience. Rows of faces no longer just smiling politely, but evaluating him, judging him. And behind every face, he saw Meghan's headlines, the Netflix specials, the memoirs, the interviews that spiraled, the smirks, the think pieces. Kelly's tone softened. I think people want to see Prince Harry succeed. I do, but I think they're confused. You ask for privacy, then publish a book. You walk away from titles, but continue using them. You talk about being misrepresented, but you walk onto every stage. Harry sat still, silent. You can't expect people not to question that, Kelly said. That's not malice. That's accountability. It struck him. Harder than he expected. His lips parted like he was about to reply, but nothing came out. Kelly pressed on, calmly. You say you want to talk about veterans. Good. Let's do that. But don't slam the door on everything else when it's part of your story. Silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds. Finally, Harry spoke, but it wasn't confident. It was bitter. You have no idea what it's like to lose your family in front of the world. Kelly's voice didn't rise. It didn't harden, but it lost its warmth. You're right, she said, but I know what it's like to grieve in public, to have your lowest moments dissected. I may not wear a crown, but I've worn pain just the same. The audience went silent again. Not out of shock, but out of reverence. Harry swallowed. The fight in him hadn't left, but it was flickering. And that's when Kelly leaned forward. Tell us about the veteran who changed your life, the one you mentioned last time, the mother with PTSD, the soldier you couldn't forget. Harry blinked again, caught between fury and purpose, because this was the moment to pivot, to connect, to be seen for the right reasons. But instead he stood up, slowly, deliberately. Maybe I made a mistake coming here, he said, eyes sweeping across the room. Maybe there is no safe place left. Maybe people don't want the real me. They want the headline version. Kelly remained seated, but her eyes didn't flinch. That's up to you, Harry, she said softly. You choose what people see right now. The cameras didn't cut. The crowd didn't blink. The stage was still, silent, waiting. And the prince just stood there. Prince Harry stood in silence, hands clasped behind his back, as the tension in the studio became unbearable. The air wasn't just heavy, it was charged. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath, unsure whether to zoom in closer or pull back and give the moment space. Kelly adjusted a note card on her lap, the motion deliberate, controlled. She didn't rise. She didn't flinch. You say people don't want the real you, she said, her voice calm. But you walked in here dressed as a version of yourself you wanted them to see. A ripple of whispers moved through the audience. Harry laughed, short, bitter. So now we're talking about image? Kelly didn't blink. Aren't we always? That landed. Harry turned toward the audience, scanning the faces. Some looked sympathetic, but most looked tired, like they'd heard this story before, like they were watching someone unravel and didn't know how to stop it. I came here to talk about veterans, he said, louder now, about trauma, about healing, but all you want is the tabloid version. You're the one turning it into that, Kelly replied, still seated, still poised. I offered you a chance to be real. You chose to be defensive. He took a step toward her. Not aggressive, but close. Too close. The audience shifted. Security at the side of the stage tensed, though they stayed in place. You think you know what it's like, Harry said, pointing down at her, but you have no idea what I've been through. Kelly finally stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean in, but the shift in her energy was immediate. Authority, presence. I don't pretend to know, she said, but I listen. I respect. And I don't lash out at the very people trying to understand. A small burst of applause, scattered, hesitant, but real. Harry heard it, and it rattled him. This is exactly what I was afraid of, he muttered. A performance, an ambush dressed as empathy. Kelly folded her arms, not unkindly. Then maybe you need to ask yourself why you feel ambushed every time someone holds up a mirror. That silenced him. It silenced everyone, because it didn't sound like a talk show anymore. It sounded like therapy. He looked around again. The judgment wasn't just coming from the stage. It was coming from the crowd, from the camera lenses, from the thousands, millions, who would see this later. Kelly stepped forward, just enough to lower her voice. Tell me about the mother who came back from deployment and found hope. You said her story moved you. Harry's mouth opened, then closed. The story was there. He had it. He wanted to share it. But the moment was slipping away, buried under his own spiraling frustration. Instead, he deflected. You don't really care, he said, shaking his head. You're just trying to salvage a segment. A quiet gasp from someone in the second row. Kelly smiled faintly, not amused, disappointed. Is it so hard to believe someone might care and ask difficult questions? Another murmur, this time from the crew behind the cameras. Harry stepped back, visibly rattled. This was a mistake. Kelly didn't move. This could have been a moment, she said, but you chose a meltdown instead. The word echoed, meltdown. It didn't come from her mouth in anger, but it hit like a slap. The audience inhaled sharply. Harry turned, starting to walk off stage. Kelly didn't stop him. Not this time. But as he reached the edge of the platform, he paused, one last time. And that's when the audience turned. A woman in the front row, no older than 30, spoke loud enough for the microphones to catch it. We wanted to hear you. You didn't want to be heard. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't mocking. It was true, and Harry knew it. His shoulders slumped, just slightly. Not enough to look broken, but enough to look human. Prince Harry lingered at the edge of the stage, his body angled toward the exit, but his pride wouldn't let him leave. Not yet. His jaw was clenched, eyes fixed on the floor, as if searching for the right words to justify the storm he had created. Kelly Clarkson stood rooted to her spot. She wasn't grandstanding. She wasn't smirking. She was still calm, but behind her eyes was a glint, resolve hardening into something unshakable. Harry, she said softly but firmly, you came here to promote your cause. You could have done that. You still can. He didn't turn. I'm not doing this, he muttered, the words barely audible. You already are doing this, Kelly replied. The only choice left is how it ends. That was it. He spun back around, hands raised, voice rising. You want a show? Fine. Let's give them the drama. That's what sells, right? The audience winced collectively. There was no applause, just the sound of one man unraveling in real time. Kelly raised a brow, stepping forward, not to confront, but to command the moment. I don't exploit pain, she said clearly. I highlight courage. I've had grieving parents on this couch, survivors of abuse, veterans who couldn't finish a sentence without shaking, but they sat here with dignity. You're drowning in ego. The words hit like thunder. Harry flinched. You think I'm the problem? No, Kelly said. I think you're in pain, but pain doesn't excuse arrogance. A low gasp echoed in the studio. Somewhere off camera, a producer could be heard muttering, "We're going viral." Harry's voice cracked. You don't know me. Then let me, she answered. Silence. For a heartbeat, the moment teetered. Would he open up or implode? But then Megan's name slipped from someone in the audience. A whisper, barely audible, yet sharp enough to pierce the tension. Harry heard it, and something snapped. He stepped back toward by his center stage, voice now taut with rage. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You want Megan, you want gossip, you want blood. Kelly shook her head, disappointed but unsurprised. No, you brought her into this now. You're the one turning advocacy into royal theatrics. Another flicker of something behind his eyes. Shame? Fury? Both? Why did you invite me? He asked, now genuinely baffled. Kelly didn't hesitate. Because your cause matters, and because you used to too. The line hung in the air, heavy with finality. Harry opened his mouth, but no words came. The camera zoomed slightly closer, catching every tremble in his jaw. Kelly stepped to the side and gestured toward the chair. You can sit down and finish this right, or you can walk off and prove everyone right. He stared at her, and the chair, and the sea of eyes judging every move. For a moment it looked like he might sit, but then, I'm done, he whispered, removing his mic. Kelly's eyes never left him. Then at least have the grace to leave with silence. He didn't reply, but this time he didn't storm off either. He simply exited, quiet, head low. The roar had burned out into resignation. Kelly turned to the audience. Let's take 5, she said, her voice clear, but shaken. As the lights dimmed for a commercial break, the viewers, both in the studio and at home, knew something historic had just unfolded. Not because of who walked off, but because of who stayed. When the cameras returned from commercial, Prince Harry was gone. The chair across from Kelly Clarkson sat empty, microphone wire dangling from its side like the aftermath of a battle. The tension hadn't just broken, it had exploded and settled into a stunned, breathless quiet that swallowed the entire studio. Kelly stood there for a beat longer than scripted. No teleprompter, no producer whispering in her ear, no cue cards to hold her hand. Just her, the cameras, and a sea of eyes waiting to see what she'd do next. She took a breath, then looked directly into the lens. I want to say something, she began, her voice steady. Not just as a host, but as a human being. Backstage, producers scrambled. Was she going off script? Would this be a PR disaster? Kelly didn't care. What just happened on this stage wasn't part of the plan, she said. And if you felt uncomfortable, confused, maybe even angry, so did I. But I believe in transparency, and I believe that when someone comes on this show, they should be treated with dignity, even when things go off the rails. The audience listened in rapt silence. I've interviewed hundreds of people, Kelly continued, from presidents to pop stars. I've laughed, cried, and shared my own personal stories here. But never have I seen a guest come in so defensive, so determined to misunderstand kindness as an attack. A subtle, scattered applause began. I asked Prince Harry one question about balance, about how he manages life and family while doing incredible work. I didn't mention scandal, I didn't pry into tabloid rumors, but it triggered something in him, something that had nothing to do with me. The applause grew louder, firmer. Kelly's eyes didn't water. She didn't tremble, but her conviction burned brighter than any studio light. I care about veterans. I care about mental health. I care about people doing the work, not just talking about it when it's convenient. But I will not be spoken to like I'm the enemy because I dared to ask a human question. At home, social media exploded. Hashtag Team Kelly was trending within minutes. Clips of Harry walking off the set circulated across every platform, usually paired with captions like entitled meltdown or this isn't how you advocate for veterans. But it wasn't just the drama people responded to. It was Kelly's grace, her refusal to lose her temper, her quiet strength, her ability to keep the focus on what mattered, even when it would have been easier to make the moment all about herself. Back in the studio, she closed the segment with a quiet nod. We'll be back next week with more stories of resilience, inspiration, and yes, accountability. Because this space, it's not for tantrums, it's for truth. The audience erupted in applause, standing ovation. As the credits rolled, viewers across the country watched not just a talk show, but a turning point. Prince Harry had arrived with a mission, but Kelly Clarkson had reminded everyone who the real voice of reason was. Not royalty, not scandal, but authenticity. And for once, that was enough to steal the spotlight.